And we're live. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Dr. Paul, as you know, from menspsychology.com, Men's Psychology Substack, Romantopedia Substack. And I am joined by actually a longtime hero of mine, literary hero. Hero is a man. Actually, I was going to say he goes. My next guest needs no introduction. The length, the length of his time as a journalist, doing dangerous jobs, being in the worst of war-torn areas as a correspondent, having lost many people in his life, and facing death numerous times, leading up to his most remarkable work, I think, in my time of dying. Decades ago, Sebastian Junger was hailed as the new Hemingway, and I've always believed that to be true. And I got to say that when I told some of my younger male friends, except for maybe one, Rob Henderson, none of them knew who he was, and I was like, "You've got to know who this man is, because this is essential reading for you as a man and as a young man." So I want to welcome you, Mr. Junger. There's lots to talk about. I build this as being about on love, on death, and on being a man.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Well, thanks for being here. I went through a lot of your work to refresh my memory. I saw The Perfect Storm back in the day, and I saw it again with fresh eyes. And it occurred to me you've gone full circle with this recent book, this latest book, going from seeming to fearlessly face death with every assignment you've done, every project you've done, and then finally encountering death face to face, and your own father, and some of the end of life biochemical events that are known to happen, the DMT flooding of the brain, and the meeting with those you have once known already in the afterlife, if you believe in an afterlife. I don't know where you are with that, but it occurred to me that all your life you faced death. And I always believed as a young man following your career that this guy is fearless. He must have already made his resolutions with death and settled on the way it was going to be for him, and he no longer needs to fear it, like an initiated male who's been through the fear of death already.
I'm happy to disabuse you of all of that if you wish. I'll let you hang on to it, though, if you want to. It's up to you.
Well said. Well said. Well, we all want to believe in our heroes. And nonetheless, you are heroic. I thought I was going to come into this talk a little bit academic about things and talk about how the main drive of my life, if I have had to only pick one thing, would be anything in medicine. I started as a surgeon, by the way, a surgery resident, and I quit it to go into anesthesia, which is about levels of consciousness and essentially death-like experiences. And then from there, I switched into psychiatry because I always had wanted to be a writer and book author, and I thought that'd be the closest. But I never forgot my surgery training, and it's so much struck me about your stories and your narratives that I realized, no, I need to not talk as much about science with this gentleman, but about stories and storytelling and their power. Even though the number one goal of medicine should be stop death, if there's nothing else that you're going to focus on, then at least stop death. And that goes for my field too, where 80% of completed suicides, the biggest risk of death in my field is suicide, 80% are male. And so a lot of my colleagues are kind of circling the wagons now and starting to study what's going on with males, that we don't understand them at all in terms of how to prevent death, from this psychiatric perspective. And you have faced death physically numerous times and seen medics and written about them and depicted them on film. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you're an Oscar-nominated director, best documentary uh, um, about death in war. So, what? How would you, not cutting to the end, but how would you summarize your journey from facing so much death to now having experienced a near-death experience and meeting your dad? I'm especially interested in what did that do to you to see what may have been your dad, or do you believe that was your dad that you met at the end before you came back?
Well, let me clarify that you can take risks, calculated risks, and not really be at all okay with the idea of dying, right? I mean, it's like you can go to a casino and gamble without being at all okay with the idea of bankruptcy, right? So there's a level of denial involved in taking risk that actually is the antithesis of accepting death. You just don't think about it, right? And so much of the risk taking that I did, I was a high climber for tree companies when I was young in my 20s. I did the aerial work for tree removal companies, and I worked 80 or 90 feet in the air with a chainsaw on a rope. And, very easy way, easy way to get killed. And I was not at all okay with dying when I did that job. But I realized that I would only get hurt if I made a mistake. In tree work, you are dealing with the laws of physics. Everything is knowable. And if you get hurt, you get killed, it's because you screwed up, not because someone T-boned you at a stop sign or whatever, something you don't have control over. So once I figured that out, I just became very, very detail conscious. And I, in combat, I was the same way. I was not, no one's okay with dying. I mean, very few people are okay with dying, particularly when they're younger. But I was okay with risking it. And I risked it in ways that I think were, you know, judicious and cautious and, whatever. But I was not at all, I was not at all okay with the idea of dying. The times where I thought I was going to die, I was not at all at peace. I was anguished about it. And those moments or minutes or that hour, or in one case, that hour, left real scars psychologically for me. And thinking you're going to die is, I think, one of the most damaging things that can happen to a person. And that has happened to me, a couple of times.
Yeah, well, along those lines, in the Korengal Valley, what mitigating factors could you set up for yourself to be a safeguard against dying in such a dangerous, like the most dangerous military U.S. Episode engagement?
Well, say getting behind cover if they're shooting at you is a great mitigating factor, right? Uh, if there's indirects coming in, you try to get under something and get very low, and you do everything that if you're not a soldier, you do everything that the soldiers are doing. In my case, I was shooting video, not a firearm, but everything applied, right? So I was a great mimic of those around me, which is a deeply human trait. And you see children do it. You see people in new environments, in new groups do it. I mean, your first day in prison. I've never been in prison, but I imagine your first day in prison, you're quite the observer of what the norms are, so that you blend in and don't do anything wrong. And that's absolutely true in combat as well.
Wow. I was thinking, as far as storytelling goes, and how you have experienced, war torn areas. You've experienced a love of your life in your second marriage, a woman who contributed to saving your life, really, in this last book, as far as I could understand.
Yep.
And it reminded me of the theorist of story who wrote the book Story for screenwriters, Robert McKee. And I think it was him who said that the best stories in the world are either those of love or those of war. But the best stories of all are finding love within the context of war. These are the best stories ever in the world. And it struck me that your latest book is such a story. It's a war to stay alive, to replace your blood, to do the detective work. I almost saw you as like a physicist, of the anatomy of the pancreas and the vasculature. You went into every little nook and cranny of the anatomy, but at the same time, there's Barbara and the love of your girls and the love of Barbara saving you.
Yeah, let me just tell people basically what happened to me. So, basically, I was a war reporter for many years, and I had a number of close calls. I know reporters who came way closer to dying than I ever did, and have way more experience over there than I do. But I had my share, and then I gave up. I gave up war reporting, and eventually got married and had children, two little girls. And if they get loud enough, you'll hear them through that door right now. But they're 9 and 6 and stuff right now. But so this is in 2020, in the June of 2020, in the middle of COVID, we were living in a remote area in Massachusetts on an old house from 1820 at the end of a dead end dirt road in the woods, no cell phone coverage. The landlines were old, and when it rained, they shorted out, and you couldn't even call out on a landline. Uh, I'm a very, very healthy guy, right? I mean, I'm athletic. I'm very extremely active and very healthy. It never occurred to me that I would go to the emergency care for any other reason than a car accident or a chainsaw accident, right? I just like never occurred to me, right? But I didn't know, yeah, love in a war zone. We're all in a war zone, right? Every single one of us could die today just as unexpectedly as you might in a war zone. I mean, our bodies are miracles, but they're in some ways fragile miracles, and you don't know what's about to happen to you, even if you're extremely healthy like I was. So in mid-sentence, talking to my wife on a beautiful June afternoon, I felt a sharp pain, a sudden pain in my abdomen. And I sort of stood up to try to work it out. I thought it was some kind of crazy indigestion, and I almost fell over. My blood pressure was already tanking. I didn't know it, but I had an aneurysm in my pancreatic artery. An aneurysm is an unnatural ballooning of the artery wall. And if it ruptures, you are in extreme danger. I was losing a pint of blood every 10 or 15 minutes into my own abdomen. Right. And, if someone had just stabbed me, the doctors would know where to stick their finger to plug the leak. With internal hemorrhage, it's very hard to locate it and to access it. And, you can lose about 5 pints of blood before you die, 5 or 6 pints of blood before you die. And I lived an hour from the hospital. So I was literally a human hourglass. I had no idea I was dying, but I knew something was very, very wrong. My wife certainly knew something was very wrong. We were in the woods. She dragged me out of the woods down this trail till we got to the driveway, and a minimum amount of cell phone coverage. And the babysitter, we had a little bit of babysitting, like that was very rare during COVID, right? We paid like $10,000 an hour, and we got two teenage girls for a few hours, right? So one of them managed to call 911, and the ambulance came, and they drove me to the hospital, and no one knew I was dying. Not that guys in the ambulance, not me, nobody. My wife knew something very, very serious was going on. And when I got to the ER, the doctor called her and managed to get through and said, "Come to the hospital as fast as you can." And she of course, she knew what that meant. And so I got there, and they sent me into the trauma bay, and they inserted a PICC line into my jugular, a large gauge needle and catheter into my jugular to transfuse me. And while they were working on my neck, I'm conscious, right? I'm conversant. I'm talking to the doctors. They couldn't give me any painkillers because my vital signs were so low. My blood pressure was 60/40, which is really no more gas in the tank, basically, at that point, right? And
Yeah.
so I was in incredible pain in my abdomen, just unbearable pain, and going into convulsions because I was deeply hypothermic. I was in end stage hemorrhagic shock, basically. And as they were working on me, this black pit opened up underneath me. It was like the universe had cracked open, and I was getting pulled into this pit. And I knew that if I disappeared into the infinite darkness, I was not coming back. I didn't know I was dying, but I knew if I get pulled into there, like that's it. And I got very scared. And suddenly, now I'm an atheist. My father, who passed away some years ago, was a physicist and an atheist, which is like an atheist squared, right? And suddenly,
Right.
my dead father appeared above me and to my left, inviting me to go with him. Right? He was hovering there, this energy form. His essence was hovering above me, communicating with me. It's okay. You don't have to fight it. You can come with me. I was absolutely appalled. I was like, "You're dead. Why would I go with you? I'm alive. I mean, I'm just in for, I'm just in for belly pain. Now, you got the wrong idea here, Dad." And I said to the doctor, "You gotta hurry. I'm leaving. Like, whatever you're doing, you gotta hurry because I'm going." And eventually, they managed to save my life in the cath in the in interventional radiology, where they got a catheter into my vascular system and snaked it around to the ruptured artery, which took hours and hours for them to do. And they managed to get it there and embolize the leak and plug the hole. And I wasn't out of the woods yet, but they saved my life without having to open me up with a knife, which is really fortunate because the odds of surviving that are much, much lower.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say to have to open you up, the risk would be enormous. Um, I I remember you're thinking about one of the things you said in your book. I love the audible version because it's literally your voice reading it. It's very enjoyable. But I remember a part in it where you were talking about the sacrifice back to the war, right? Comparing war and surgery in a way. I felt as a surgery resident, it felt like being at war, even though I've never been in the military.
Yes.
Um, and 60 patients twice a day to round on. A guy's walking down the hall, having pulled his chest tube out, so his lung has collapsed. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the middle of the night. I'm the only one here. I have to deal with this guy. And you don't think of yourself anymore. Like you were talking about the medics and about your remarkable program training journalists to basically become medics in a way to be able to help other journalists, right?
Yeah,
For which you've received accolades and awards.
I started a group called Risk
Risk?
Risk RISC Reporters Instructed in Saving Colleagues. It was to teach freelance frontline war reporters how to do medical interventions on the front line on themselves or others. Unfortunately, we ran out of funding and had to close. But we trained hundreds of journalists. It was after my buddy Tim Hetherington was killed. Uh, uh, he died of catastrophic blood loss from a shrapnel wound in Libya in 2011.
That must have been a massive, massive, terrible loss, given that you were brothers at arms, in filming and being embedded
Yeah.
together for so long.
Yes, it was indeed.
I, I I remember reading about him, and I thought it's so interesting that he has two middle names, and one of them is Telemachus, which in Greek means far from the battle.
Right.
Did you guys ever
Oh,
joke
yeah.
around about his middle name, that far from the battle,
I
when you're right in the middle of the battle?
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I that might have been a bit of wishful thinking on the part of his parents. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
he spent a lot of time overseas and he was in West Africa and Liberia when I was there. He was with the rebels and I was on the government side, but it was a terrifying terrifying experience for both of us. It was a very, very intensely violent situation.
Was this Civil War, or was this surrounding the blood oil
No,
situation where you met the?
the Civil War in Liberia in 2003.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Um, yeah, that's yeah, one of those things. I mean, when you are brothers at arms with other men or women, in battle, in medical school, in any trials and tribulations in life, it's in many ways closer than family at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, did you did one thing I found surprising too, about having heard toward the beginning of your work about your dad being such a brilliant physicist and being colleagues with you're remotely related to, was it not Max Planck, but Isaac
Erwin Schrödinger. Yeah.
Schrödinger.
Um,
Yeah,
well, I was not related to him.
someone in the family.
He had an affair with my great aunt when she was a teenager, and he was in his 40s.
Right, right. Yeah. So Schrodinger's cat. But I thought your dad reminded me a ton of my dad, who was a physics major in undergrad school and loved physics and got a mathematics degree. Taught me calculus, tried to when I was 12 and beyond, I ended up having nightmares about integrals chasing me
Yeah.
through the woods. But I wondered, what when you said your dad to his friends was also known as a romantic, and I was like, wow, that's unexpected as also being a romantic, but I guess it's possible, huh?
Well, only through the eyes of another physicist, right? I mean, you understand it's a very, very particular a very, very particular population, and, when this older colleague of my dad's said that my father was a my father was on the I mean, let's just say it, he was on the spectrum. I think he was a lovely man, very sweet, loved us, but I think it was a pretty frustrating husband to have for my mom, and certainly a frustrating father to have for my sister and I. And so his colleagues said, "Oh, yes, your father was an incredible romantic." And I just thought that, do we have the same guy here? Like, I'm not sure that really describes him that well. What makes you say that? And my father was an acoustician, and there's one of the devices in the study of acoustics is something called a Helmholtz resonator, and and that was his sort of specialty. And Rudolph said, "Well, yes, your father, he's a great romantic. He was absolutely passionate about the Helmholtz resonator." It's like, well, that kind of says it all, doesn't it, Rudolph?
Okay, I see. Spectrum romantic or
Yes.
mathematically romantic. I get that. Oh my, yeah. He must have loved the idea of uh, Bath, England, and the uh, what am I thinking of? Uh, the resonance of the stone structures created by the Druids
Oh, yeah.
on
Yeah.
Salisbury Plain,
Yeah.
England.
Yeah, he did a lot of work with the NASA program and with the, US Navy trying to keep submarines quiet during the Cold War, and to keep the propellers quiet because they cavitate, they produce air bubbles that are very loud and can be detected. And so he did a lot of work in propeller design and things like that. It was all sort of top secret. And I he grew up my father grew up in Europe. He was a refugee from 2 wars. He came here, at age 18 in 1940, I think it was. And, so he, he would always coming home from the office with like a briefcase that had files in it that said top secret, like US Navy secret. Like, so of course, when I was like a 10-year-old boy, I was completely fascinated by the documents in his briefcase. And I remember saying to him once, I said, "What would happen?" I was told very strictly, "You cannot look in daddy's briefcase," right? And I remember saying to him,
Right, right.
"What would happen if I looked in there?" And my father said, well, any irony or anything at all. He said, "Oh, I would have to call the FBI, and the FBI would have to come and talk to you." I was like, I was kind of split between, "Oh, I better not look," or, "Oh, wow, I could look and then meet the FBI." Like I didn't know which way to go.
Oh, that's great. The top secret guy. Um,
So listen, I'm interested in your work in young men and the concerns of young men, and
yes,
maybe tell me a little bit more about your sort of thoughts on that, your orientation on that, because I've
sure.
done a lot of thought myself about that, having been a young man at one point.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for saying that. I think that because of several variables, cultural variables, and one of the things I love hearing about you is that you try to be apolitical. I do too, so as to not muddy the waters with a bunch of argument for argument's sake. But there have been cultural forces at work in this country in the West for several decades now, in which boys have become less in contact with dads. I know that happened to me certainly back
Yeah.
in first wave feminism. My mom was a very ardent follower of Gloria Steinem, and led to divorce from my mom and dad after many years of fighting. And my dad died alone in the basement of his high school best friend's apartment in DC,
Wow.
who was a psychologist for the Pentagon. and he died alone of a heart attack, we believe, while signing his divorce papers.
Jeez.
So he never did sign his divorce papers. He died first, and maybe that's good for him because he was Catholic. I have newly discovered Catholicism for myself. Kind of, I miss him. It's a
Yeah.
way of staying close to him, I think. But that's how he died, and I think that's the experience of many boys in our country. Nothing against moms or feminine thinking or the maternal, the important nature of the maternal, which in part helped save your life through your wife, her maternal nature. But there's a missing rough and tumble, rough, tough father, primitive father, Sebastian Junger kind of, um, missing part of the picture.
Yeah.
And can I say something on this? When I first contacted you, I don't know why, but I guess because of the Hemingway reference to you, I was reminded of one of my favorite movie speeches, which is by Corey Stoll quoting Hemingway in Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris. I love that film, Midnight in Paris, where he plays Hemingway, Corey Stoll, the actor. And he says, all cowardice comes from not loving or not loving well, which is the same thing. I believe that love that is true and real creates a respite from death. And when the man who is brave and true looks death squarely in the face, it is because they love with sufficient passion to push death out of their minds.
Oh, I'm not sure I'm willing to go along with that. I mean, I couldn't love my daughter.
Okay.
I couldn't love my daughters more. I'm a very, very involved father. I'm an older dad. I think when I was young, I might have been distracted and preoccupied with my career or whatever. But now I came to fatherhood late, and I'm all in. And I got to say that the most mortifying thing about the idea of dying is that I would leave my girls fatherless. And
Yes.
so my love for that love for my girls is makes me absolutely terrified of dying for their sake, right?
Yes.
If not for mine. And so maybe they're talking about romantic love, but yeah, I'm not sure. Death,
They are.
yeah, yeah, but
They're talking about romantic love there.
yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about humans, I was an anthropologist in college. We're the only species. I mean, if you want to get to a really core concept of love, we're the only species where a male will die for a same-sex peer that he's not related to. Right? In every species, individuals will die to protect their young, sometimes even their mate. Um,
yes.
and herd animals will collectively defend themselves, of course. But even chimpanzees, our closest mammalian relative, our closest primate relative, the males they will wage a kind of warfare. Why? Right? I mean, groups of males will file
Yeah. Yeah.
into the area, of enemy territory and attack other males from a rival group. But they will not defend each other if they're individually in danger. They will flee. They will leave their brothers to their fate on the battlefield. And humans do not do that. And they will die for each other. They will die to protect other people's children. Women will die to protect other people's children. It's absolutely extraordinary, and only humans do this. And the other interesting thing about humans, I'll just throw it in as a twofer here, is that we're the only species where might does not make right, where size does not determine the outcome of combat. In most species, the largest alpha male physically dominates. In humans, a smaller individual or a smaller group can absolutely defeat a larger one. And smallness comes with nimbleness and agility that equalizes the contest. And so between those two things, humans are absolutely unique in the animal world, and it's one of the things that gives us human society and autonomy.
Do you've seen some of the data from the Titanic disaster, right? And some of the demographic findings that the highest proportion of deaths were actually among males in the middle income to high income socioeconomic brackets, because they were busy saving the females and the children first, and there were very few females and children lost in the end. It was
Yeah, well,
mainly males of high status.
yeah, the statistic I saw was that men in the in the first class cabins, including some very wealthy individuals, died at a higher mortality rate than even than women in steerage, like women in fourth class cabins and their children. Um, they were at those people had a higher survival rate than the wealthiest men on the ship. It's because there is a very reasonable and understandable and evolutionarily sensible value of sacrificing males instead of females. It makes absolute genetic and evolutionary sense, and that will transcend even the privileges of income and rank. It's very interesting that it works that way.
Yes, and you is your view of psychology through all the human drama that you've seen and or been through, that we are more instinctual animals, the same as every other species, and ruled by that as the primary force, or are we a moral animal? Are we an enlightened, awake, conscious, moral animal, or both?
Well, some people say that morality comes from God, and I reject that idea because I don't believe in God. And morality is adaptive in Darwinian terms, right? It's adaptive in evolutionary terms. So
Yes,
our instinct for moral behavior is an instinct, right? It's an adaptive behavior that helps groups survive in a harsh environment. And so I wouldn't call that a higher or lower or anything. It's part of the algorithm of Darwinism that has shaped all of our behaviors.
that it's adaptive and kept the species alive by way of keeping individual creatures alive. Okay, that makes sense.
And
Well,
keeps the group cohesive, right? An amoral group violates people's dignity and the dignity of individuals, the rights of individuals, and the groups will split up. Moral behavior is about taking care of the individuals of a group, and that is essential. Most human groups for most of human history were 20, 30, 40, 50 people in a pretty threatening environment. And you don't want to have internal divisions in a group like that. Moral behavior keeps people roughly in line. It keeps abusive
right.
leaders from taking advantage of their position. It keeps sort of freeloaders from stealing food from the group, the group resources. It keeps all kinds of people from committing moral transgressions, which are a threat to the group. So it's all.
And law is the like a natural outcome of that, rendered on paper originally, right? Having laws that we have to
Yeah,
follow.
yeah, well, yeah, laws are basically codifying all that for a society that's so big that people don't know each other personally. But if you're in a group of 30, 40, 50 people, everyone knows each other. It's like a platoon in combat. Everyone knows each other. And if you're acting badly, right, in that group and threatening the survival of the group, there are consequences. There are social consequences, and eventually there are even capital consequences.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, what would your prescription as an author, journalist, person in the arts, director, and man who's been through a lot, what would your prescription be for the youth of today if what they've been going through is a lack of contact with dads, unlike you and your children, and unlike me and my child. I'm always going to be there. You're always going to be there, but there are a lot of young men that have no contact with an older, experienced, wise, maybe moral, pro-social male who also is good with his hands and with what to do physically to solve problems, to show him how. The use of the body. They always taught us in psychoanalysis school this simplistic way of seeing the mother and the father is the mother teaches the child to label emotions with words, to become a linguist, and the father teaches the child about the use of the body. How do I fix a car? How do I repair a flat tire? How do I get in a fist fight and win? or escape?
Well,
What do you think?
I mean, the laws of the father, whatever the statistics are there, it's obviously not everybody. Might be a component of what's sort of ailing young men, I actually don't think it's a driving factor. I mean, I think there's larger social changes and cultural changes that are affecting young men very severely. I wrote a piece on Substack, if your listeners are interested, called
Yes.
Young Men and How Democrats Lost them politically, right? So
Right. Right.
13% fewer young men identify as Democrats from 2016 to now. So in 10 years, the Democrats lost 10% of the male vote, catastrophic for them, and lost those young men for good reasons. In other words, those young men had very good reasons for walking away from the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat. I vote, as a journalist. I'm not my analysis. I strive to be nonpartisan. My diagnosis of what's going on in this country, I try to be nonpartisan, but I got to vote somehow, and I vote Democratic. I'm a liberal, right? But I would say that those young men had very real reasons
Yeah.
for walking away. So that I don't want to rehash the whole piece, but if people are interested, it's on my Substack, Tribe, with Sebastian Junger. But so what I would say actually is that um, as society becomes more automated, more mechanized, I mean, men in every society, men are given the majority of the heavy physical labor and the dangerous work, right? So 95% of
Right.
battlefield deaths are male. 95% of workplace mortality is male, because men do almost
Man.
all of that dangerous work, right? And
Yeah.
as society becomes more mechanized and more technological, the qualities that typically female qualities that are not eroded by those changes. For men, they are. So one you know
Mm.
one skinny guy in a
Yeah.
bulldozer can move more earth than 100 big dudes with shovels, right? Our
Right.
mechanized
Right.
society has sort of eliminated that quote male virtue of strength and courage, and so I think there's a massive loss of sort of like masculine identity, partly because of that. In women, the skills that women tend to have, and I just mean statistically, the bell curve for human behavior, the skills and qualities that women tend to have on average, are actually needed even more in this sort of like connected high technology society, and also, and I hate to be a sort of biological determinist, but there is no way to mechanize, to outsource to technology human birth, right? And
Right.
so,
Right.
in some sense, to be really reductive here, women ultimately will never be replaceable by human society if the human race is going to continue. Only they can give birth, right? So I think
Right.
on some
Right.
level, women sort of know, yeah, you're not getting rid of us, but men do not know that. Like they do feel like they're replaceable. I think it's catastrophic for their state of mind.
That makes sense. I used to get in arguments with colleagues, a number of years ago about, what caused the extreme success of women, the rise of women in the workplace, which is a wonderful thing and needed and necessary, but the extreme success. And they would all say, well, it was the pill, it was the sexual revolution, it freed women from the home and all this. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Is there any chance it could be the computer? Any chance it could be technology that now does the operating of the heavy machinery?
Right.
So male muscles just aren't needed. Male stature is not needed anymore. And women can do that as well or better than that.
Well, let me just say here that those jobs you're referring to are low status, low paying jobs that women generally are tr- not seeking,
True.
right? So
Right.
when you talk about sort of gender equality in the workplace, without meaning to, people generally they don't mean construction work, right? They generally mean
Right.
work that's indoors, right? That it's administrative or executive level, right? And
Yeah.
women in offices, women in boardrooms, all the places they should be, because women like men, women bring just amazing skills to that environment, right? And men and women are a
Yeah.
little different. And when you have both of them functioning in an insurgency, in a revolution, in a social movement, in a
Right.
corporation, when you have both involved, it functions extremely well. But when you talk about gender equality in the workplace, you're not talking about people making $12 an hour, digging a ditch in 80, 90-degree heat. You're actually not talking about that.
Yeah, when I first approached you, it was actually that article you're referring to that caused me to approach you because it was just so obvious to me and notable that the evolution of people's participation in the two major US parties now is starting to, it seems to me, to be shaping up into those who are more masculine natured and those who are more feminine in instincts and in nature. And I had told you I was at a dinner party quite a number of years ago, 2016, when there was an incipient administration, and this person was privy to kind of the strategies and so forth um, of that campaign. And I just had this idea in my head, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, you know what's going on with all this? Are you targeting just male voters and no one else? Because your commercials seem to lend themselves that way. It seems like you're advertising just to men. Is that what you're doing?" And he couldn't really answer, but he just kind of winked and nodded. Yes,
Yeah.
we're pursuing males as voters.
The Democrats, I'm a Democrat, right? And the liberals, I'm a
Yeah.
liberal, right? And they walked away. We walked away from young men, from from workers, like blue collar workers. We walked, those are demographics. And, increasingly, I mean, in the last election, Black and Latino voters and women migrated towards Trump in unheard of numbers, right? These are all the demographics that liberals think erroneously think that they represent, right? Oh, we're going to take care of the vulnerable minorities
Right,
and
right.
women and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those groups migrated towards Trump, towards the Republicans in the last election. So the liberals are completely deluded in what they think they represent. And, they left the working class behind, in the 1960s, right? I mean, it's shameless, right? I mean, we have turned into an elitist party, and we don't deserve to win another election until we reform that. It's absolutely horrendous to watch it happen.
Oh, what do you think the reason is? Being a dyed in the wool liberal. I mean, I'm a classic liberal, like Bill Maher myself,
Yeah,
which I guess now makes me a moderate somehow,
right. Well,
or maybe even a
look,
Republican. I don't
yeah,
know.
I mean, I'm a liberal, but the really radical left is so totalitarian and
Yeah,
dictatorial in its speech standards and its ideological rigidity that, I don't even know what to call myself. But I vote Democratic because I think the Democrats are actually interested in running and having a democracy in this country. I think the
yeah,
Republicans have slightly lost interest in that. But that's just my personal view. But why did they do that? I don't know. I don't know why they did that. I think ultimately they thought, well, we don't need them. They have to vote for us anyway. We're the party. We're not the
right.
party of country clubs and corporations. We're the other guys, so they're always going to vote for us. And it was arrogant and wrong. And we, as much as I abhorred what happened in 2016 and 2024, we freaking deserved it, and we deserve to keep losing until until we become a party that represents the common person, right? And then
Yeah,
we're an enormously corrupt operation as well, right? Like, I mean, don't get me started on the Clintons. I mean, Jesus, like, how come that
uh-huh.
those are not liberal? Those are not liberal ideals.
Oh, what about the idea of advertising and patronizing the public and the voters with nonsense like, oh, we if we only spent 10 million more dollars on this advertising campaign, we would have acquired this many votes. I, as a psychiatrist, I feel insulted by that kind of talk because it's like saying people can't think for themselves. They can't look at the actual issues for themselves. They're dumb, and we
Yeah,
need to just advertise to them in enough of a Disney-esque,
yeah,
appealing way that will just sway them without
yeah.
in their mindlessness.
It's like when they say, "Oh, we got the messaging wrong." Right? No,
Right.
you got the content wrong, man. You
Yes.
got the people right.
Yeah.
When they when they sidelined Bernie Sanders, I mean, I don't know if Bernie could have won, right? But when they sidelined him, they
Yeah.
really undermined Hillary's chances at winning because she looked illegitimate. Crazy, right?
Right.
And the
Right.
country
Yeah.
and the country still voted for her. I mean, people keep saying, "Oh, this country's too sexist to elect a woman." We did elect a woman by popular majority in
Right.
2016.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
we did it, right? It was a quirk of the electoral college that kept her from being president. But don't just stop saying that. It's just not true, right? We did elect a woman. And so but shoving Bernie aside was a terrible miscalculation. And then Joe Biden's lateral pass at the 10-yard line to Kamala
Oh,
Harris, expecting
right.
her to run 90 yards downfield for a touchdown. Like, give me that's not going to work. What do you
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
people think? You're so arrogant. You guys are so arrogant. Like, come on, have some humility and some caution, right? Some care, some love for this country.
Yeah, it's hard to know, how few people were responsible in the end for finally deciding who was going to run, and that the clock was ticking that whole time.
Yeah, and
I
Biden, I voted for the man, but he completely betrayed us by going back on his promise to be a one-term president. We should have had a proper primary and
right,
and coming up with
right,
a really, really strong team, and then when we wouldn't be in what many, many people call a constitutional crisis with our entire democracy hanging in the balance. Like, we did that. Trump didn't do that to this country. We did that. The Democrats did that to ourselves.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have some colleagues that I've worked with closely in the past at University College London and the British Psychological Society who studied males very intensively, and they've written the world's first and only textbook on male psychology. And one of the things that they say in it is that we have, and this will apply to the world of advertising and the world of politics and voting too. We don't understand male psychology clearly. We've modeled males after how feminine psychology works and what techniques work for it. And that includes in advertising. So one of their examples, to wit, is the phrase toxic masculinity. Everybody loves that phrase. Bloggers somewhere invented it. Some lady invented it somewhere. I forget who, a sociologist. But if you think about the two words in the phrase, the first word toxic simply means narcissistic. And through my training, I've always learned that males and females are equally potentially narcissistic, which is the opposite of morality and doing right and doing good, or Aristotelian Nicomachean ethics. Um, but the other word, masculinity, is an immutable trait. It's an inborn trait. So what they're pairing is a pejorative with an immutable trait, which is the old trick of every schoolyard bully, like saying, you dirty, whatever, Irishman. you know,
Yeah.
Pairing a
No,
pejorative with an immutable trait is the ultimate sneaky insult by a bully.
yeah, I mean, the
And that's
sexes are
all through
different.
the advertising.
Yeah,
Men are bad.
the sexes are different, and they have different qualities, and they have they have different struggles, different toxic behavior, right? And so,
Yeah.
if it's fine to call people toxic if they truly are, but I don't think gender has much to do with it, right? I mean,
No.
narcissistic traits. I mean, that's you don't have to be male or female to have those. You don't want political leaders with those traits, right?
Right.
And right,
Right.
and there's plenty of, I mean, look, again, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, so that's my bias. But looking at the Trump administration, I'd say there's like quite a few toxic females in that thing, right? And so like, what do you do with that? Like, so why do you even need the nomenclature? Like, why even reduce it to a group trait that everyone in that group is potentially guilty of, right? That's the basis of racist. That's the basis of racist thought, right? Like, you just don't want
Yeah.
the left doesn't want to
Yeah.
have anything to do with that. Like, get away from that. That's not what the left is. Stop it.
And yet the dark triad traits, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism, those same traits also ironically lend themselves to rising in leadership positions by way of political dynamics and being clever and Machiavellian to make your way into power. So the power almost self-selects for a lot of
Absolutely.
those people being among the elite and among the powerful.
Absolutely, and,
Yeah,
males are really good at coalition forming. They're much better, than women at it, right? So,
right.
coalitions work very, very well on the battlefield. They work extremely well in business. They work extremely well in politics. And then some females
Yeah.
will join a male coalition because it's a very effective, train to get a ride on, right? But that male coalitionary behavior, my friend Richard Wrangham, who's a primatologist, has written amazing things about the male coalition and how it functions in human
Mm.
society. And that male trait makes them extremely effective in things like politics. And the other thing is that sort of high status males are rewarded by the thing they're all looking for, which is female attention, sexual access to females, right? They're rewarded in a way that has no equivalent for high status women, right? High status women do not have
Right.
the sort of equivalent rise in attention from the opposite sex that high status males do. So it really drives men to succeed at all costs because the payoffs sexually are enormous, right? And there isn't an equivalent for women. And so I think that dynamic also is at work in sort of selecting who which people will completely devote their lives to business, to
Yes.
warfare, to politics, to whatever those things that give a high rank to an individual. That there's a reason why males tend to make that choice and sacrifice their entire lives in order to achieve this goal, even risking going to prison to achieve this goal. Women are less likely to do that because the rewards are just much lower for them.
Yes. That makes sense. I know, as we approach, the end here, um, I wanted to, do 2 things. I wanted to, tell you a quick story that was once told to me in an ER, about trauma, about male trauma, and I wonder if it answers a question you asked in your book on death, um, whether, am I blessed by this or am I cursed by this? And it made me think of this story from 30 years ago, told by psychiatrist John Bridges in the middle of the night in the ER in Denver when there were no patients coming in. He goes, "Hey, Paul, I might as well teach you something. Would you like to learn about trauma in terms of Greek myths and what it says about trauma?" It's the story of Philoctetes. Philoctetes was a young man like the golf caddy to Hercules. He carried Hercules' bow and arrows around for him in battle, and he eventually became a physician. And when Hercules died, Philoctetes was honored by being allowed to light the funeral pyre and also was given the bow and arrows. And he became a physician with the Greeks as they sailed to Troy to fight the Trojan War. And on the ship,
Oh, I think we lost him.
any hearts?
Uh, you dropped out for about 15 seconds.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I saw you there the whole time. I think we're still good. But yeah, it caught me right in the middle of my story. But basically, Philoctetes got such a terrible wound from the snake that it ruined the morale of the sailors. It was messing with their heads. He was dying of this snake bite. So the sailors threw him off the boat onto an island and sailed on to Troy, where they proceeded to be losing miserably. So they go to the Oracle of Apollo and in traumas.
I, I, I think I've been having problems at my end. I think my internet dropped out. I'm sorry. It may happen again.
That's okay. That's okay. Do you hear me?
I hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. So the long and the short of that story was it's a story of war, but it's a story of male trauma and
Right.
how there's certain wisdom and knowledge we can only get through our wounds, through having been through hell, and that the wisdom you come out of hell with can be given to others, it can heal others, it can benefit others and society, and that we need to never forget our comrades, even when they appear to be as impaired as it gets.
Yeah.
We
I
need
looked
to
at the, I
side
looked at
by
the
them.
word, I looked at the word blessing. My wife
Yeah,
asked if I felt blessed or cursed for having almost died from this
yeah.
ruptured aneurysm, and it was enormously traumatic to me, and I didn't know how to answer. And I looked up the word blessing, and it comes from the Anglo-Saxon word "bletzian," which means blood. And the idea is there is no blessing without the shedding of blood. That they're twin,
Ah,
right?
yes.
And when I understood it in those terms, I realized there is no either or, blessed or cursed. You're always both. You're always both. You cannot be blessed without it having cost you something, and that's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it noble, and that
Mm.
that put my mind at ease with what I'd gone through.
That's like initiation rituals. That's like the boy must die for the man to be born. The girl must die for the woman to be born.
That's right. It's why
Initiation.
battlefields are sacred. It's why childbirth is sacred. It's at the heart of all of those essential human and sacred processes.
In our last couple minutes, I'm touched by your tender fatherly nature toward your girls. I too have worried about being 47 when I had my son. Now he's 11. I'm 58. How long will I go on? I want to go to 100 if possible. He wants me to show him every country in the world. That's his goal. I don't know if I'm going to rise to that, but what do you want to leave them that's enduring? And even while you're still here, what do you want to do with whatever time you have to empower them and educate them and give them wisdom and make them good people? What are you going to do?
Well, they're not getting an iPhone until they're pretty old. For starters, this is this is my phone. It's a flip phone. Keeps me mentally healthy. I think our society would be doing a lot better if we didn't have smartphones. I I mean, I just try to instill in them the value of uh, appreciating the natural world and understanding the sort of like the idea of human dignity, right? I mean, that's at the dignity is at the core of everything, right? I mean, it comes from a Latin word meaning to have value, right? Every person has value, and if you somehow tragically grow up without understanding that, you're at risk of leading a bad life, of hurting people, and so that's at the core. We live in a mixed income, low income, mixed race neighborhood in the Lower East Side of New York, and
Yeah,
we just on purpose, deliberately, we travel the world because my daughters need to know that the world is almost infinite in its forms. People are almost infinite in their variations, and it's all beautiful and dignified. And you're just one of 8 billion. And that to me is the task is to communicate that to my daughters.
that's amazing. That's one thing I want for my son someday. When I was an undergrad student, I did what's called semester at sea. You sail around the world taking college classes and studying religion, politics, economics around the world for a term of school, and it's still available for undergrad students to do. And it
Yeah,
makes the world much smaller, and you see the gradations of people and their beliefs and their governmental systems. There's nothing like that convincing our children that anything is possible if you're willing to talk to anybody
yeah.
and dare to understand them in the way that you describe. I think you said journalists don't tell us what to think, they tell us what to think about. right?
Yeah. They try to provide the framework, the context for the events that are happening, but they don't tell you what to think about those events, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. Listen, thank you so much, Mr. Younger, Sebastian, if I may. Um, look forward to seeing you again sometime in New York City.
thank you. And for your listeners, if you're interested, my story about almost dying and what happened afterwards with my father, it's called In My Time of Dying, and it may interest you.
Oh, very much so. It's compelling reading, and Tribe as well. All of your works, really.
Thank you.
Highly recommended. And I'll be talking to my people even more about you. I'll be writing about this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
I
You
enjoyed
have a
it.
wonderful night.
You too.
Bon
Bye bye.
appetit. All right. Bye.